I just want to remind you that there's still the shortage of data protection expertise. So that means more job opportunities. However, you will need to have the necessary experience and competencies.
When we talk about data governance, it's a whole of organization point of view, because it is not just governing personal data, but all kinds of data that the company's business and functions have to deal with. So this is a great opportunity to raise the profile of protecting data.
We're going to be looking at what it means to the data protection officers and to data protection compliance. I'm also going to be looking at the latest buzz that's happening around what we call generative AI. A lot of you will know it better in terms of ChatGPT. I want to ask all of you, what do you think is the impact of ChatGPT to our privacy?
Although it's not fully open to China, some of the brilliant Chinese people, they have opened those telephone numbers in other regions to register and to chat with the ChatGPT. One case where a guy, he has lost his mother, so he's treated the ChatGPT as his mother and saying that, hey, could you just pretend you are my mother and talk to me? I'm so lonely. And see all these stories happening in China.
We will be focusing on areas that could be aggravated with the popularity of generative AI technology, because we see a lot of companies adopting generative AI because of the mass availability of what we call the software development kits. So we're going to cover 3 parts: the enforcement trends in Singapore. We're also going to take a snapshot at enforcement in China. Right? So a lot of you will know that they have a data protection law, the PIPL. And in part 3, we are also going to be dissecting the trends in the EU GDPR. And we're going to be asking this question: what do all of these trends actually mean? Because of what happened in COVID-19, the number of cases have actually dropped. And as of end of last year, the numbers have been very flat. But I would want you to look at the total fines that you see on top of each bar. You will notice that there's a distortion here. In 2019, the fines was 1.64 million.
Sing Health, the hospital group, had 1.5 million of its patients' records leaked to the public sphere, and for everybody to have access to personal data of patients, including the Prime Minister's medical record. And the hospital group, Sing Health, together with its IT service provider, IHIS, Integrated Health Information System, will find a joint amount of $1 million.
If you were to compute it and look at it in terms of the average fines, we can see that it's on an upward trend. You can see from this chart here that 20% of all of the fines, or in this case 25%, right, of the fines were more than 25K.
The PDPA in Singapore has been enforced since the year 2014. So which means that if you count backwards, it's almost 9 years, almost a decade. For some of these cases, some of the companies could have been fined a couple of $1,000s in the past, but now they are crossing more than $10,000.
We can expect more enforcements now that things have returned back to normal post COVID-19.
Yeah, there's always been a lag. So some of the figures don't tell the actual story, because a number of these big cases take a long time for the investigation. Can stretch to 1.5 to 2 years.
One key point that we like to highlight is that no industry is spared. We have recorded enforcement cases in every single industry sector.
If you look at all the orange bars, one insight which I can gather from this is these are those industries where they have a lot of touch points, where they have many customers, many clients who interact with them. So obviously, the more touch points there are, the higher the frequency of a data breach.
As you can see from this chart, what we have done is met the obligations to the different sections. And we've grouped the Section 11 and Section 12 to the accountability obligation.
There have been many cases where accuracy caused data breaches. Say, for example, companies that send out mass emails through a mass emailing list using the CC field instead of the BCC field. One of these emails was sent by a credit bureau that remind all the recipients on the email to pay up their outstanding loans. So you can imagine the embarrassment that has been caused.
We also had a printing company, right, who sent out the wrong printed materials to the wrong customers,
Right.
but they were not grouped as accuracy, they were grouped as
Protection.
So, not surprising to all of you that the biggest breaches are Section 24, that's the protection obligation. And if you are a DPO, you should know that 80% of your effort should be spent on securing and safeguarding your personal data, especially from hackers. And we have voiced our concern that because of COVID-19, a lot of companies went into digitalization, they rushed into it, into enabling remote access, but they may not have done it securely.
When you look at, say, for example, the highest percentage of violation is under protection obligation, that doesn't mean that the IT systems are not secure, because most companies by today would have realized what are the basic data protection technical measures to put in. Say, for example, use of firewalls, antivirus software, and so on. The problem is not so much lack of the technical measures or inadequacy of technical measures, but more the human error, human lapses. So no matter how sound or robust your measures are put in, if the human being is not educated, not made aware of, or just couldn't be bothered, then they will take shortcuts. And this is what gave rise to some of these data breaches.
We've noticed that over the past years, 48 organizations, as you can see from here, got the internet-related breach. What usually happened was due to the insufficient security measures, it leads to unauthorized access to their websites, to their portal, to the database. And on top of that, the regulator also has a strong focus on the mobile application and the CCTV, particularly on whether there are notifications made to the individuals.
Companies are pushing out a lot of apps just to be ahead of the curve, ahead of their competition. So sometimes even half-baked or three-quarter-baked solutions without being fully tested, and worst of all, without considering the data protection requirements as part of data protection by design. That's why we're seeing all these apps that are bringing about a lot of problems.
We covered the top 5 industries, but what I want everyone to pay attention here is, even though we don't see a lot of enforcement cases because of digitalization, I want to focus your attention on your online presence. I also want everyone to take a look at the mobile apps, and also in the area of surveillance. 59% is there's a compound annual growth rate every year for the last 6 years. I just want to point out to you that this is just 1 month job postings. You can see that there were 42 job positions in 2016. And take a look, just last year, this has gone up to 695 job positions. 1/3 of the 695 job positions that were available in Singapore, they were all relating to data governance, meaning that the title either reflected data governance or data governance was reflected in the job description. I just want to remind you that there's still the shortage of data protection expertise. So that means more job opportunities. However, you will need to have the necessary experience and competencies.
When we talk about data governance, it's a whole of organization point of view, because it is not just governing personal data, but all kinds of data that the company's business and functions have to deal with. So this is a great opportunity to raise the profile of protecting data.
In a criminal case perspective, there are over 1,000 cases filed under the charge of infringement of citizens' personal information since the Personal Information Protection Law, or short for PIPO, came into effect, and more than 500 insiders who leaked citizens' personal information have been prosecuted, and they're from various industries such as telecommunications, banking, insurance, real estate, hotels, and logistics, and there are 14 administrative penalty cases reported. The most frequent offenders, they are technology companies, and majority of them, they were given warning as the penalty. And the most commonly involved provision is Article 13, actually, from the PIPO, which specifies the legal basis for data processing. The ride-hailing giants was given 8 billion yuan fine. It amounts to 5% of their annual turnover, which under the PIPO is the maximum fine. And on top of the fine slapped on the company, the CEO and the president were fined 1 million yuan each. And the regulators had on-site investigation on them with a very comprehensive interview and review of their management and storage of the personal data they captured. It uncovered 16 illegal acts, among which is the excessive collection of 107 million passengers' facial recognition data. And they also illegally collected screenshot information from users' phone. And Didi was then delisted from the exchange. In addition to that, the company has been unable to register new users since the investigation started. And this status lasted more than 1 year. Shanghai-based company called Xiaopeng Autos. The company was fined 100,000 yuan for illegal collection of consumers' faces. Again, it's the facial recognition without consent. And according to a notice for the penalty, the company purchased 22 cameras with facial recognition functions, and they install it in their stores so as to count the number of people entering the stores and analyze the proportion of people by their gender, by their age, and the firm did not inform the consumers of the data collection and its usage.
I want to remind everyone what is so special about facial images is because you can extract biometric data from it.
In 2021, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, or short for MIT as you often heard, they conducted technical testing on a massive scale that covers 2.08 million mobile apps, and they identified 1,549 apps as non-compliant. They took down 540 of them.
If you are doing a digital transformation and you are talking about new applications, have you done the DPIA, a data protection impact assessment? A gentle reminder here that you should review your mobile apps, especially if it has been outsourced.
Mobile phone companies and whoever wants to detect where we go, what we do, they have our location data. So that is one sure way of knowing all your private movements. There's a big joke that went around that the mobile phone companies and the telcos know more about you than your family members. Secondly, is because of all these threat of facial recognition, biometric data that's capturing the biodata of individuals, that could easily lead to identity theft.
Since the GDPR was enforced in 2018 till now, you can see from the screen that the number of fines have gone up, and you're not reading it wrongly. So in 2021, it's about a billion odd, or 1.07 billion. And last year, even despite COVID-19, it was already 831 million. We have enforcements on the key tech giants, and as you'll see later, many of them are already dabbling with AI. Yeah, so we got Meta, a company called Clearview. They had, I think, about 20 billion facial images, and like what the Chinese case involved, they extracted biometric data. So they got fined.
The European regulators seem to have a love affair with the two big companies. One is the Meta Group, which owns Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platforms. And the other one is Google. A lot of the services are turned on by default so that there's no consent that's obtained before the use of such services. Another European regulator fined Meta as well for not obtaining explicit consent from the users of Facebook for the use of their personal data for behavioral advertising purposes.
So ladies and gentlemen, it's not just security, but as you heard from William, it involves consent, it involves sensitive data, unlawful processing, and all of that. As you can see here, it is still on an upward trend with regards to the overall numbers of enforcement cases. If you look at the overall cases, although there are 1,300 over cases, about what, 1/3 or more involves CCTV surveillance, just like what you saw in Singapore. There's also social media and cases involving children's data. UK is actually enforcing companies. They're actually investigating a bunch of cases involving children's data because they are a vulnerable group of categories of personal data, which they have a code that they expect organizations to follow.
The issue with the regulators and the people who draft the data protection laws is the legislation always lags behind the technology, because before the technologies become mainstream use, they don't really have a good feel of what will be their privacy concerns until some people start using and start complaining. So then they put together some kind of law. When I talk about legislation, it's not only just the data protection law, but also the ethical use of such things. And then secondly is most of these technologies today, they are what we call privacy intrusive technologies. They are very small, miniaturized, can be hidden anywhere, and they just capture data passively.
Besides making sure that you have a legal basis to process your personal data, notice that there's transparency in EU. They're very particular. Yeah, you better be transparent in your data processing practices.
There's a lot more emphasis on protecting human rights, like making sure that there's a more lawful processing before personal data is being collected, used, or disclosed. There's data minimization to let people know that the organizations are collected as little data as possible that's necessary to fulfill their purpose and so on.
One common thing that we identify both for the EU and for the Singapore, you will see the number is growing for the cross-border requirements. Those cases that you see in 2021 and 2022 is growing. And just like in Singapore's case, before 2019, there was no cases reported. We only have started to report those, the breach of transfer limitation in Singapore in recent years.
For those of you interested, Amazon holds the record fine of 746 million. We went through the areas of GDPR enforcements. Want to remind all of you, it's not just security or processing now. Look at lawful basis, transparency, and rights of the individual. There's data minimization and so forth. We expect new data protection laws to be passed in this part of the world, whether it's this year or next year. We have the Brunei law now in consultation, the Vietnam draft law. We're also watching our curiosity whether they will actually pass a federal law. That means, ladies and gentlemen, there's good news for all of you DPOs, right? There's going to be a huge shortage and demand for especially experienced and trained DPOs, right? Now, I'm not going to go give you a lesson on generative AI. We will have a separate session later. But what I do want to point out is, if you go into the Play Store today, you see emergence of tons of apps. And there's even a joke that a startup that just simply uses an AI API calls themselves an AI company when they know nothing. I compiled this so that all of you are going to be conscious, especially on deepfake videos. You can see the use cases. You can generate realistic images based on description or CCTV footage. Sometimes the quality is poor. You can use AI to beef up the quality, and you could simulate emergency situations and all that. But look at the bad side of it. There's deepfake videos. I want everyone to think about the fact that just now in the enforcement cases, it's only a handful. We expect them to get worse with all these new technologies.
With the emergence of such so-called more intelligent kind of technologies that are more privacy intrusive as well, there is a need, in fact, quite quickly for organizations, for the consumers out there to be educated and made aware of what are the dangers and what are the risks they need to be grappled with such technologies. How do they bring in all these as part of the data governance strategy and so on?
So we are watching the trends. And again, I want to reinforce to everyone, if you are a data protection officer, remember, we are moving not just to protect data, but to also govern the data. It is not just about reducing risks from personal data, but also increasing the value of data.
For more data protection resources, visit www.dpexnetwork.org, the Data Protection Excellence Network, and sign up for free as a member to have full access to all content. Do also like and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn if you found this useful.